Hello. A few months ago I made a video on tying a bowline, on tying a square knot, and tying a sheet bend. And I wanted to try and improve that video, put some new knowledge into it, and go through it again. So if I get started with the bowline, if I take this rope, and probably the most important part of doing the bowline is starting out with this loop. If the loop is not done right, it's not going to work. So I cross this again right there. This piece goes over that, and then I take the end, the so-called rabbit, have him come out of the hole, around the tree, and back down into the hole. And this is actually the way I've tied bowlines for a long time. Again, the virtue of this knot is that this loop doesn't slip down, so it can be used for rescuing someone or something like that. Now, I did a little more research on this, and the way this end comes out is kind of interesting. If you look at the way most bowlines are tied, this free end ends up on the inside. And I've got a diagram here. We'll look at this for a little bit. There's two possibilities here. You have this one with the free end right there, and then you have this one with the free end right there. And if you look up and look at tying bowlines, this is probably the one you're going to see most often. So let's call this standard. And this one goes by a lot of different names. Probably the most common name is cowboy. So I found out that I most usually tie the cowboy. There's a lot of arguments that the cowboy actually stays tied better, holds more load. It's always worked good for me, but if you want your bowline to look more like what you're going to see in the pictures, you probably want to tie a standard. So let's go back to the rope then and see what we get. Well, first of all, what did I tie here? Well, I already kind of gave you a hint that I usually tie the cowboy, and indeed this free end is over here, not inside the loop, and it is the cowboy. So how can I convert this to a standard? Well, if I take this thing apart and the rabbit chooses to run around the tree the other way, so now we again have this loop here, and the rabbit comes around the tree this way and back down into the hole. You end up with the bowline here and the free end on the inside. Okay, so a couple things to think about when you're tying the bowline. This is probably the most traditional. So if you're in a contest or something, you'll want to tie it this way. Whether you tie the standard or whether you tie the cowboy, again, the critical part is getting this initial loop right. I'll finish up here one more time by tying the cowboy. We'll poke that end back in there. So there's the bowline, and again, the beauty of this is that this loop here, you could put it around something and it won't cinch down on it like 2/2 hitches or a slip knot or something might do. Well, let's move on to the square knot then. I'll find the other end of this rope. And with a square knot, pretty easy. You start out left over right and then right over left, and what you want to end up with a square knot is you want these two pieces here to come out on the same side of this, and you also want these two free ends to be on the same side. And I'll show you what happens if that doesn't happen. A lot of times people will mess up when they tie the square knot, and they'll end up with something like this, where you see this end right here. Get something to point with, that this end right here is not on the same side of this rope here as this end, that they're opposite. And this is, of course, the classic granny knot. And to fix the granny knot, you just have to take it halfway apart and then make sure that it comes out like this, that this free end right here is on the same side as this one. Also, what about these two ends? If these two ends aren't on the same side, you have what's known as the thief's knot. So let me tie that real quick. It's a little less intuitive to tie. That's why it's probably used as a thief's knot, because if someone was messing with your stuff and then put it back, they tend to tie a square knot. You'd know that it had been messed with. So if we look at a thief's knot, which actually doesn't hold as well as a square knot, what do we see the difference is? These two free ends are not on the same side. This free end over here is there, and that free end is right there. So let me go back and tie a square knot then. So there's your square knot. That these two pieces are on the same side of this rope. Okay, that is again over here that these two pieces right here and here are both underneath these, and these two pieces here are on the top side of that. And then these two free ends are on the same side. They're not alternating, so that becomes important. So that's a proper square knot. Hopefully you can practice that. Well, let me finish up with one more knot. So I'll take one end of this fairly large rope and grab another rope here and talk about tying a sheet bend. Okay, now that's a sheet, S-H-E-E-T, a sheet bend. One of the things I remember is sometimes if you have a tarp or even a sail, a sheet, and you don't have a grommet in the end, you could take it and scrunch it up and turn it into something that you could put a loop in, and then you could tie it this way. So the sheet bend looks like this. It looks very much like the square knot. Actually, probably I should say very much like the thief's knot. And when you tie it then, instead of poking this back under here and having what would that be, a square knot, we want to come around here like this, and there we have a sheet bend. So instead of having this piece go back under here like that, you'd have what, a thief's knot then, wouldn't you? You actually bring it under here. And there's again lots of variations of this one, and also lots of different uses in terms of a weaver's knot and things like that. But what you want is you want this free end on the same side as that free end. That's kind of a big deal. And if you do it the other way, if this end comes out over here, it actually doesn't hold nearly as well. Now, speaking of holding well, if you want a variation of this that holds a lot better, you could do the double sheet bend, which would be to come back around here and do this again. And this then holds actually much better. Over here, make that look a little better. Okay, so you'll get something like that. Okay, well, let me turn this back into a single sheet bend, typical sheet bend, a standard sheet bend. And again, you just come around here and have that piece sticking out there like that. And you know that it's right when this piece here, this end here, is on the same side as that end there. So that's it for a bowline, for a square knot, and for a sheet bend. So rewind the video, use your pause button, grab a piece of rope, and practice these on your own. Hopefully that works out well for you. Thank you for watching.